Thank you so much. I'd like to invite the mayor for the city of Sonoma, Amy Harrington, to now come and speak to her experience that the city went through.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I thought that as an elected official, it might be interesting to share with you sort of the story of how the fire happened and what we were doing. So we had not had any training at all at the city council about what we might do in a disaster. We had no training, and we had a new city manager. And so at 1:30 in the morning, the mayor that year called me on my cell phone. I thought, this can't be right. And I answered the phone, I was like, hello? And she's like, I think the town's on fire. What should we do? That's literally what happened. What should we do? We had no idea. So then we started calling people, and we could not reach them. We could not reach the city manager, we could not reach the chief of police, and it was sort of and then our chief of police lived in Santa Rosa. There was a fire between the road where he lived and getting to our town. So there were a lot of things that delayed the opening of our emergency operations center. It did not open probably for about 2 hours after that first time that we, the mayor and I, knew that there was a problem. And also, we weren't sure what our role was. Should we tell people? Should we alert the public? It was not clear, so we decided that the mayor would go down to the fire station in person and find out what was going on, and she went down there, and basically almost nobody was there because everybody was on the fire. And so, in terms of forward going, looking at what to do, the first thing to know is probably a lot of people won't know what to do. So it's really helpful, like, do you have, simple things, do you have a laminated card that has all the phone numbers of the people you're supposed to call, that's clearly marked that says call this person first? And in our case with the fire chief, he had a cell phone which was charging, it was out of battery, so it was off, and he also had a pager, but no one had used the pager in so long, and the people that worked there are so young that they didn't even know what it was, basically. So we did have these systems in place, but we just, we were not expecting this to happen this way. So, so we did get our emergency operations center open, and then the issue for us was that, so for Sonoma town, there was no fire in town, but there was fires all around us, and so, so Sonoma town is about 10,000 people, but the Incorporated Valley, which is one community, is a total of 50,000 people, and we have CAL FIRE for the unincorporated areas, and then we have our own fire department. So because there were so many fires going on simultaneously, our relatively small fire department was in charge of protecting a lot of our valley for several days. So for 2 or 3 days, we were kind of on our own trying to figure it out. And then also because we didn't have fires in our town became the hub of organizing services and deploying people for everybody else because we weren't facing an immediate threat inside the town. We had the resources available to coordinate everybody else. And the other thing that came up, and I don't know how it is universally, but for Sonoma County, I heard this over and over, which is the police and the fire departments have sort of a friendly rivalry. And so there had to be a coordination with and we had people coming from Alameda and we had people coming from all across the state to help us, but we had to create an operational system of hierarchy so that we could have people not stepping on toes, putting egos aside, and figuring out how tasks would be delegated. And that actually worked out really, really well, but it's something that needs to be practiced, I think, in general to figure out who is going to be the chain of command and how are they going to talk and when are they going to do that. So that was sort of the start of the fire. So most of our feeling as elected officials was we should not get in the way. That's what we thought. Let's not get in the way. None of us know anything about how to respond, really, to a fire. We do have an obligation to the public to keep them informed, but we also don't want to have anything go poorly because we needed to get information. But it was really problematic because, as you know, under the Brown Act, you cannot have all of the city council together meeting without notifying the public. And the people who were running the emergency operations center did not have time to brief us one by one. And so the question was then, do you have just an unelected body of people running sort of a crisis situation? And some of the things involved evacuation and, really, I don't think martial law might be a little too strong, but really a very restrictive and prescriptive things happening to the citizens, and the question being, shouldn't some elected official be in the loop here, but how do you do that if we can't have anything but a public meeting? So some of the things you don't want the public to know, maybe you don't want to create a panic, you want to have some private discussions, and it's really, really tough because you can't have the whole, you can't have the voting body together without giving notice. So that's something to figure out, which is like, how are you going to do the briefings? Who's going to be informed? What's the nature of the information going to be? But all of that was really interesting. And then we heard back from some other areas, and their staff felt really like that their elected officials had slowed things down because they really insisted on being involved, and the staff felt that they weren't helpful, and the elected officials felt that they were being excluded. So I think that's a piece to really consider, as the basis is like, everybody wants to know how can I be helpful, but it requires a thoughtful discussion about what each person's role might be and how you're going to communicate with them. So then our fire went on and on and on, and eventually we had to have a public meeting, and I have some advice with regard to holding public meetings during a fire. Be very careful about allowing politicians to have unlimited time to speak. That might be good for all events. But so we had, the whole community came, we're a small town, everybody kind of knows each other, and they all packed in the grade school, everybody's there, and CAL FIRE is there, our fire chief is there, the CHP is there, all the people with the information are there, and the idea is like, well, first we have these, the senators, supervisors, they just want to make sure that everybody knows they're there. And then, the whole audience is waiting for them to shut up. So so then we decided later, if you ever have a meeting where you're sharing information during a fire, just have only the people that have real information doing it. But there were other tools that we used that turned out to be helpful. So like we did a Facebook live stream, and then one of the roles that we could play was that as elected officials, we have so much contact with people through social media and other means that we could really effectively deliver a message about what was happening and spread that information. But the public information, not just about alerts about emergencies, but also just general public information, how you're going to get that out and what tools do people actually use. So those were some of the things. And then, let me check how much time I have left. Oh, 3 minutes. Okay. So all of that happened, and I can talk a little bit about the after the fire. So after the fire, all these homes burned down, and a lot of people, basically the insurance companies then had to pay whatever it took to get people housed under the terms of their policy. And so rents went up. A place that used to be $2,800, now insurance companies would pay $10,000. And we're just talking about a regular nothing house. And of course, people started doing that, right? And it wasn't rent gouging because a lot of them didn't have tenants. If they had 2 properties, they'd move out of their house and, jack it up to $10,000. And that went on for years because they were entitled to have this rent coverage until they had their structure replaced. And so in terms of the baseline rents, there were these just insane rents being paid by the insurance companies. And then the other half of that is that many people were underinsured and they cannot rebuild, and that really has a destructive effect on communities. And Sonoma County is it's really a multi-generational type of county. Many families have been there for 4 or 5 generations, and they play all these sort of, I don't know how to say it, but sort of routine roles. They're sort of like families that are in the fire department and families that do Little League and softball, and they have like these generational roles. And those people are displaced and they cannot come back, and there is no way for them to come back. And so it really has a kind of a long-term destructive effect. One of the places that burned down in Santa Rosa was a mobile home park. And mobile home parks for us are one of the best sources of affordable housing. And I want to say it was like 500 mobile homes. And that's not going to be rebuilt as a mobile home park now, presumptively. And so it's just like these really deep, persistent losses that are going to last for a long time. And I don't know how you plan for those, well, one is to like help people know about being properly insured. That's a huge deal. That's a huge deal. If people didn't know what insurance they had, and so our supervisor, Susan Gorin, for our area, her house actually burned down, and that's another issue, which is that the people that were fighting the fire and also the elected officials were also affected by the fire. You know, and even our own supervisor has to decide whether or not she can rebuild her home because of the insurance issues. And then the last issue I'll touch on of our fire is, so a lot of our firefighters had really, were deeply troubled by the things that they saw and experienced during the fire, and that is also an ongoing process. And one of the saddest things I heard, we had somebody refused to leave their home. And the firefighters told them over and over, you need to leave your home. Wouldn't do it. And the fire died down, so they had to go get more fuel for their fire truck, and they went. And then as they were going, the fire kicked back up again, and that person did die in their home. And those people feel, it's not their fault, but they feel incredible guilt, and it's really hard to continue to work. So there are things that will happen and as we're in this constant fire season, there's things that will happen that require a lot of care for the community and the first responders. So that's all I got on our fire.